Hi everyone, and welcome to the second ever Niche Artefact Jamboree. Thank you so much for coming and supporting us here. I realise that Jamboree is something new. I'm hopeful that it's going to continue to grow because I believe in championing the people that have been in certain creative sectors, for them to have a platform as well and for them to be celebrated. So I'm just going to give a little introduction. Georgie, do you want to go further away? Make more of an entrance, come on. All the way to the Havana bar. So, Georgina is the founding editor of Press, Nottingham's own independent publishing house. She's been commissioned by the BBC to write and perform for radio and TV. She has toured her poetry across the UK and Germany, and recently performing at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. She has a first-class degree in creative and professional writing. She began her career with spoken word collective Mouthy Poets. Please welcome to the stage, Georgina Wilding!
So good to be here. Thank you. Yeah, nervous. Oh god, oh god. I'll get there. Have another drink.
Drinking cocktail, really fun. Right, so we wanted to start from the beginning with Georgina. We wanted to talk about her upbringing and the type of life that she had growing up. So we're going to start at the beginning of your life and then work into your achievements, what you've done, and where you're going to be going, as well as Georgina will be performing a couple of selected pieces. So take it away. Where did it all begin for you? Where are you from?
I'm from Arnold. Yeah! Repping the Nottingham ends. Yeah, so God, I grew up with my grandparents from about the age of 12. Home life was a little bit crazy before then. You know, I had a stepdad that was not ideal. So my grandparents took me in when I was about 12. And from then, it was kind of a case of just trying to find out who I was when I wasn't, you know, in trouble all the time and not being angry all the time, you know what that's like, working through your teen years. And so when I realised that I was doing all right at school, nothing special, but just keeping my head above water, I decided to do my A-levels, and then doing my A-levels, you know, the teachers were like, you should apply for uni. And so I applied for uni and I went to Liverpool to do forensic science.
Ooh. Plot twist.
Yeah, real plot twist. Which I'd done at A-level, loved it, and thought, you know, I'm a working class girl, first in my family to go to uni. I should probably do something, a proper job, you know. So I did a year in Liverpool. It was the best year of my life. Had so much fun.
Study?
No, not at all. And you won't be surprised to hear, I dropped out after the first year. Yeah, I just thought, this is not for me.
This is what success looks like.
Yeah, big pivots. And so when I dropped out, I knew that writing was where my heart was, but I hadn't found poetry at that point. I'd only studied it at school. I came back to Nottingham and was trying to find myself and stumbled across the poetry collective Mouthy Poets. And so we used to meet every Friday at Nottingham Playhouse and put on 2 shows a year. And I really fell in love with the way that poetry was, yes, very rule-based, much like science was. So I could understand form and understand the rules, but also breaking those rules was really championed. So again, being able to say, okay, I can see this form, but I'm going to break it and do something different with it.
So with Mud Press, what is Mud Press?
Yeah.
How did you get involved with that?
So I was in Mouthy Poets before I even went to uni second time round, and I was seeing all of these incredible contemporary poets that were ripping the stage apart with their performances and what they were writing. But at the time, there weren't many publishing houses that focused on poetry, especially contemporary poetry. And I'd done an internship in my final year of uni with a local publishing house called Candlestick Press. And they are great, but at the time, again, weren't publishing contemporary poets. So I thought, fuck this, I'm going to set up a press. Yeah! Do it for the poets. So yeah, I graduated uni and set up Mud Press, the publishing house, which is solely for poetry. And the goal there really was we would release themes and advertise it to the public and say, write a poem on this theme and submit. And then my responsibility would be to pick 10 to 15 poems on the theme and create an anthology, some of which are down there, some of my favourites that I brought for you all to see tonight. And I loved doing anthologies because in an anthology you're lifting up 10 to 15 poets rather than it just being a solo collection for one poet. So it was a real opportunity for me to gather up that talent that I was seeing and say, submit, get your work out there. And for poets, having a big CV of individual poems published everywhere leads you to getting that debut collection, which is a book of all of your own stuff, which is, it's so hard to do and pitch yourself in the scene because publishers don't want to take, you know, the financial risk and if you've not really got an audience or a CV behind you. So Mud Press was really my way to do that for the poets that I was seeing be amazing. Yeah.
So after you dropped out of university, so talk us through from dropping out from uni to actually starting.
Yeah, so when I found Mouthy Poets, I realised poetry was definitely my calling. It was a thing that I just loved. And I found the degree Creative and Professional Writing at Nottingham Uni, which I loved because that professional element of it was all about how you write press releases, how you edit for big publishing houses, how you write for the web. It had all of that corporate arm that I knew would keep me afloat whilst I was doing my creative. But the amazing thing about that degree was half of it was also upskilling you in your own work. So there was a lot of editing classes, you were torn to bits, you know, showing your weaknesses and developed. So by the time I graduated, I'd got that corporate arm, which saves me to this day actually as a freelance learning designer, which is very boring, we won't talk about that. But yeah, it was that kind of tool to get the bills paid while I absolutely threw myself into poetry. And I was always gigging and writing as a solo poet, but Mud Press was really my first stamp on the scene to say, this is my industry, I'm here for my people, I'm here for the poets. So
how intimidating was that for you, considering the risks?
Yeah, very.
Yeah, like, who does that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been working at Candlestick Press, which is a very prestigious press, and they're very kind of upheld within the community for their quality. I mean, they're stocked all over the place, all over the world, no doubt. So for me, you know, as some of us have already spoken about, being a working class girl from Arnold, it wasn't an obvious step because publishing is traditionally old white men in power. So it was an intimidating thing to kind of find my feet. But when the first collection came out, which is Hunger, just on there, I sent it out to a lot of reviewers who gave great reviews to the book. So it started to make me think, okay, I can do this. Like, my taste is, you know.
You're on the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. And the poets in the collections were great because the thing about Mud Press, because it's just an indie press, you can spend time with the poets and develop them and edit their pieces with them, so you know what you're putting out is their best effort, which was great. But yeah, it was definitely a scary start. My first call for submissions, I thought, what am I going to get, 10 people? But we actually got close to 100 submissions on that first one. Yeah, it was really affirming, actually.
And they were all from local Nottingham?
All local, yeah, some from London, there was a couple from Scotland. It was really, really varied. But I just marketed the hell out of it and called people into that spirit of saying, you know, the collections are about poets having that platform and getting in print and stepping into that more academic, if you like, world. There's a lot of gatekeepers in the poetry industry when you start to want to try and climb that ladder and get published and get into that world. So I think people really saw the cause behind it and submitted in droves, which I was grateful for and still am to this day.
So you've been inside the internal politics of what it takes to get a book from manuscript to shelf. So what was that process like for you? How are you experiencing that right now?
Yeah, I mean, it was scary because I didn't really know it in design. Obviously, you've got to literally format all of the books. You've got to find artists to illustrate the covers, but then you also need a graphic designer to do all the placement of the covers. You've got to buy your ISBN codes, then you've got to send them all to the British Library. And then the next part of that was the kind of business part, which was getting your sales notes together and literally knocking on the doors of the local bookshops and saying, please stock these books. And Mud Press, our first stockist was a bookshop called Ideas on Paper, which was in Cobden Chambers. And then we managed to get into Five Leaves, and then we got into Waterstones. Yeah, that was a big achievement for me. Yeah, but it was a lot of knocking on doors, begging people for emails, begging people to meet you in person and understand the mission and what we were trying to do.
So you must have had a lot of doors slammed in your face throughout this journey, I can imagine.
Oh, so many stories, yes.
Do you want to give us one of those stories?
I did, because the people I tell stories about, I still have to work with to this day. They know who they are, though. They know who they are, I can tell you. Maybe that's off the mic, I'll tell you later.
So after you had your work published, then came the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Was that after your published work?
No, it was before. So it was whilst I was publishing other people for Mud Press, but I was still very much just gigging and applying for everything. With poetry, it's very much about applying for those positions. So the first festival that I ever gigged at was in Burton Joyce, and it was called Lively Bird Festival, and I got paid £50, which I thought was incredible at the time. And whilst all us poets were in the poetry stage, Top Loader was on the main stage playing Dancing in the Moonlight, which was such a moment for me. Yeah.
Well, a bit Top Loader.
Come on. So yeah, it was great. But yeah, Edinburgh Fringe was one of those gigs where I knew there was an organisation that focused on poets that was putting on a gig at Fringe, and I emailed them and I sent them my pitch and sent them my videos and said, have you got a slot? And they said, yes, we'd love to have you.
Well, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival has got such a mythology around it and such a prestige around it. Yeah. So tell us more about what it was like actually being there and how was it?
It was scary again, because Edinburgh Fringe, you're competing with audiences. Yeah, literally, always, just a common theme. So yeah, the people that booked me, they kind of got us in, and we were in this crazy bar that had it felt like a dungeon underneath with loads of little side rooms, and in every side room there was something different going on. So we were competing with comedians and one-woman shows and all sorts of crazy stuff. But yeah, they got us in there, they kind of kicked us all up on the stage. I think I had a 10-minute set or something, and just gigged for my life. It was, I really felt like, because, it's Edinburgh Fringe, there are people in the crowds, there are publishers there and other people that book you for gigs, so...
And even people that don't know anything about the publishing industry, they've heard about the Fringe Festival.
Yeah.
There is a mythology and prestige that comes with that, and for you to be performing there is incredible.
Thank you.
So I wanted to, while we're talking about your work and your current presence, I wanted to know how you approach your writing processes. So what is your unique inroad into writing poetry?
Yeah, I think it's different. It depends on whether I'm writing to commission, so for somebody else's brief, or whether I'm writing for myself. When I'm writing for myself, I tend to find little sparks of inspiration in tiny moments that you see. It might be something as simple as a bird that's, I don't know, being weird in a bush.
Or a lamppost.
Yeah, exactly, or a lamppost, you know my work.
If anyone's seen the video teasers on Instagram, I posted some of your previous work that she's put on YouTube. That poem about a lamppost, that was amazing.
Thank you.
It was so creative and whimsical and out of this world.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because that is what I try to do with poetry. So coming up in spoken word, you find a lot that they're seeing poets write kind of narrative poetry, which has a beginning, middle and end, and they're quite lengthy, and sometimes can feel a bit like an explanation of a trauma, which I didn't want to do. I wanted to lean very much on metaphor and simile and mythology to kind of get those messages across in a way where other people can fit themselves into that work as well. So I might have written a poem about becoming a street lamp and conning men and blah, 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 being all sassy.
Which is so original.
Thank you.
Like, who would have thought mythology of a lamppost would be that interesting?
Well, I've got it. So do you want to hear the lamppost poem?
Yes.
So I talk about this poem as my entry into my Disney villain era.
Yes.
Yeah. And it is literally called Becoming a Street Lamp.
Keep it up for Georgina Wilding as well.
Okay. I stood on the pavement, up close to someone's wall, and became a street lamp. It wasn't difficult. I outstretched both my arms, held a cigarette by the tip of its butt, stood on my toes, and willed it so. That's when I learnt I could will things. Before long, I could rustle like any good bush, so convincing small bugs would cocoon on my leaves and dogs would run past without sniffing me out. I was proudest when I learnt to be a meal, would watch men eat chunks of me and think how nutritious I am, how satisfying. Prouder still when I learnt I could choke them on the way down. I could be the coffin they were buried in too, cradle them softly in the mud and then slip out, let them lay there naked as the day they laid with me.
That's incredible.
Thank you. Oh my gosh.
Right, so this leads into the next question, was where do your ideas come from? Are they literally just sparks from everyday life? Does something happen in the news? Like, what is it that triggers you for your inspiration?
Yeah, I think it's a cliched answer, but reading other poets is definitely the key to being better. So I read a lot. I have a whole, wall of books that's just poetry. But in terms of writing for me, it's about getting out into the world and seeing things that spark an idea and just running with it. I have to say, you never ever know where a poem's going to end up. Oftentimes I just start with a little first line. There's a poem I'm working on at the minute because I came out of work and saw a little crow hopping around. And my opening line is something about a crow being a joyous thing and the way that it hops. I have no idea where that poem's going to end up, but that first image has sparked something. So it's just about writing to explore it and then editing. Editing is your best friend. So you can put the cliches in on your first draft, but when you come back to it, it's about drilling into that and going, well, what do I mean by that? What am I actually trying to say? And then finding an original way to say it, but also attending workshops. There's nothing better than being led by another poet that is asking questions and reading prompts and getting you writing about something that you wouldn't normally touch.
So for your lamppost poem, how many times did you have to edit that one?
Oh, honestly, loads individually, probably about 3 or 4 times myself, but then when I found out I was getting published and I submitted it in the manuscript, I then had to edit all over again with the publisher of the publishing house because they have their own ideas and house styles that you kind of have to work alongside and grow with. So yeah, I couldn't even tell you. That book was 2 years in the making, really.
You should be incredibly proud of it.
Thank you.
You got published books.
I know, what the hell? I made it.
And everybody can buy a copy.
Yes, you can. It's down there.
It's amazing.
Right, so that all perfectly leads us to the next question, which is with all this editing, how do you know when a poem is finished?
No, it's never ever finished. I can tell you that. Every poet will say the same thing. You'll get to a point where you think, oh my God, I did that. This is really good. I feel like it's saying what I wanted to say. And then you send it out into the world and you can come back to it even a month later and you spot things and think, why have I done that? I would definitely do that differently.
So would you agree that that ties in with what painters would say, a painting is never finished, it's abandoned, so would that apply to an art form like poetry
Absolutely, absolutely it would. I think poetry is very much an art form, much like painting, much like photography.
Of course, it must be one of the oldest forms of art.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why older poems are in rhyme, and that was because before we could even write, before we even had pen and paper, we remembered things and told stories through rhyme. So, that's where the history of it is, really.
And so how has your poetry evolved over time since your early beginnings when you were younger?
Yeah, it's really changed. There are some horrific videos on YouTube, which I'm sure you will all go and dig out now, of me rhyming. I definitely rhymed a lot when I first started because I didn't know anything else.
So are you anti-rhyming for poetry?
For me personally, I try to avoid it, but there are poets out there that do it with skill and precision. I think with any form, for example, if I wanted to write a poem about being truly heartbroken or something, sad and desperate, if you start rhyming, it makes it feel jovial and it changes the tone of the work. So Form is an incredible tool, especially if you've got an idea and you're stuck on how to put it on the page. Start with a form because it will constrict you into a box, and then you start to grow from there, and you can break the form and adapt with it. But now I'm very much more in the kind of free verse or forms that don't rhyme world when I write, and I lean very heavily on metaphor, as you've seen, to kind of get across. I think it's really hard because when you want to talk about something in your day-to-day life, it's really easy to just explain it and just say, oh, this happened to me. Hey, guess what? My stepdad's a bit of a dickhead, But who wants to? It's not entertaining. It's not an art form. So learning your craft, learning how to write in form, to use metaphor, means that you can say that in a way that is artistic and creates an image and a mood and a feeling in a much stronger way than just saying, hey, I had a shit time growing up, So that's what
I'll say from my personal experience, from your material that I've heard so far, I would say it's about revealing something.
Yeah.
It's about the unknown and sparking something into somebody when they're reading it. That's what I get from what I've heard from you. So.
Thank you. That's a huge compliment. I really appreciate that. And I think that's the sign of a good poem. Somebody could be writing about something that you've never experienced before, but a good poet can write in a way with their imagery, with the mood that they set, that you can put yourself in it. It might be a poem about their dad, but you're relating it to a partner because the skill of the poem is there's room for you as the reader in it.
What would you say is the biggest challenge you face as a poet today?
Getting time to sit down and write, absolutely 100%. It's like any art form, it's hard work, it's a job, it's a task to an extent. Yes, those beautiful lines and ideas come to you all the time when you're a creative, but being strict enough to say, no, I'm sitting down, the rest of my afternoon is writing, and then going back and editing, it's the thing that I definitely struggle with the most. And some poets have routines. There are poets that wake up at 5 a.m. and write till 7 and then go to their day jobs. Other poets have, groups and classes that they go to every week, or they pay for courses. Everyone's got their own way of doing it, but I'm still, to this day, finding mine.
What would you hope that readers take away from your poems?
I hope that readers, especially with Hagstone, my collection, I hope that they come away from it identifying with their own pain within the work. The book is a journey, and by the end of the journey, you're kind of standing in the wreckage of what came before, and instead of, or I hope anyway, instead of feeling like you're stuck and you're wallowing in that pain and you don't know what to do with it, it's a springboard. It's a springboard into learning you and becoming empowered and going, yes, that happened, but what's next? It not becoming your everything. So empowerment, really, for me.
Right, so Georgina's going to read one more of her poems, and then we're just going to have a little break and then go to part 2. Georgina, that's it.
Yes! I thought that I would read you one of my newest commissions.
So has this been spoken up before?
It has. So it was a commission for the Green Hustle Festival, which is a sister to Hockley Hustle, and the commission was so loose, they just said, we want you to write a poem about the planet. And that was really it.
It could be anything.
Literally anything. And I don't typically, although nature is a huge theme for metaphor within my work, I don't tend to write that way. So, as always, I read around and found a poet called Ocean Young, who really, really inspired me. So I used his first line, which was like any good son, and went with like any good daughter, and used a metaphor for the planet. So I'm going to read that to you now, see what you think. Okay, planet. Like any good daughter, I pull my planet from the stream by the cuff of its shirt, breathe sharp air into its canopies, across its mountain tops, push on the mud-flat plains of its chest. The edge is no longer where we left it, we are over it, free fall, fruit dropped from a tree, a penny in a vending machine. Turn to face it, kiss your baby's feet. There are years there waiting to be walked. The question is a smoke cloud carried by the wind, the answer both there and not there, like a note in a vodka bottle, like a cat in a box. And there is a cathedral of us, frustrated, singing sore, head first to the heart of it, knee-deep in bamboo straws and plastic-free wash pods, kneel down beside the not enoughs and what's the points, asking, can someone call an ambulance? As the planet's shirt begins to dry and our arms get tired of the push. You'll make me cry, don't
Right, so please help me welcome back to the stage, Georgina Wilding. We're just going to open with a poem and then we're going to get back into the interview.
Yes, okay, so I thought I'd open with a silly one, or silly-ish. I'm going to let you decide whether or not you think this is real or not. You can pick what you like and tell me at the end. This is Understanding Boys. We find condoms on Dad's side of the bed, and that's how we know he's a boy. Boys stroke girls' arms and ask them to kiss. Boys only sometimes show up when they say they will. Boys have jobs. Boys ask you get into your pyjamas because jeans are too thick. Boys are kind when they feel bad. Boys are allowed to smash things in temper. Boys tell you they know how to brush your hair and don't get in trouble when it has to be cut out. Boys follow you to school and grab you in the alley. Boys are husbands. Boys beat you until you wept on the stairs like a dog. Boys recommend each other on LinkedIn. Boys spend money they owe your granddad. Boys think you can't trick them. Boys eat girls and deny it. Drive cars with their kneecaps. Turn the wheel with one hand. Boys get rabies if you make them have veg. Boys get memory loss if their phone brightness is up. Boys can't swim in salt water unless it's their own. Boys are nose blind. Boys' hair is made from office lint. Boys' brains are made of microwave meals. Boys lose 1 inch of height every time they say, I love you. Ooh.
Incredible.
It's a little feminist book, I'm just going to say that. We're amongst friends here.
We're all for equality because that's all that feminism means, and I think people forget that.
Exactly, that's so true.
People get involved in politics and they just forget that. They see the word feminine and they think, oh, it's about women. No, it's just about equality.
Yes, preach to that. Quality, choice. Yeah.
It's not that complicated. Right, so I just want to touch back to what you were talking about in regards to inspiration and how that comes to you. So that really triggered a memory for me into a story I read about a poet. So I'm going to just read that to you now, and I'd love to know what your reaction to that would be. So it said, the quote is, I had this encounter recently where I met the extraordinary American poet Ruth Stone, who's now in her 90s, but she's been a poet her entire life. And she told me that when she was growing up in rural Virginia, she would be out working in the fields, and she said that she would feel and hear a poet coming at her from over the landscape. And she said it was like a thunderous train of air. It would come barreling down at her over the landscape. And she felt it coming because it would shake the earth beneath her feet. She knew that she only had one thing to do at that point, was to run like hell. And she would run like hell to the house. She would be getting chased by this poem. The whole deal was that she had to get there to a piece of paper and a pencil fast enough so that when it thundered through her, she could collect it and grab it on the page. And other times, she wouldn't be fast enough, so she'd be running and running and running, and she'd get there to the house, and the poem would barrel through her, and she would miss it. And she said it would continue across the landscape, looking, as she put it, for another poet. And then there were these times, this is the piece I never forgot. She said that there were moments where she would almost miss it. So she's running to the house, she's looking for paper, and a poem passes through her, and she grabs the pencil just as the poem is going through her. And she said it was like she would reach out with her other hand, and she would catch it. She would catch the poem by its tail. She would pull it towards her, into her body. She would transcribe it on the page, and in these instances, the poem would come up perfect and intact, but backwards from the last word to the first word.
Oh my God. Ooh. That is so special, and I can't agree with that enough. It really, really feels like that. The poem thundering through you, that is, yeah, absolutely 100%. That's so special. There are poems that I wrote, you know, something had happened to me 10 years ago, and suddenly it would surface, and with every writing prompt and every class I came to, it could be a prompt about a dog, but somehow that thing that I was supposed to write about would just come to the surface every time. I really, really agree with that. So special.
Have you got any pieces of work that you think relate to that kind of situation or that kind of story?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can find some for us. I think so. The thing that I think about when you tell that story, trigger warning, we're going to talk about abortion. If you feel a way about that, please feel free to go and get a drink or have a cigarette. So when I was 17, unfortunately, I fell pregnant with a hideous guy. And although, you know, I wanted kids, still to this day, think I want kids, but I knew that it was not the right time and certainly not the right guy. So I had to take that into my hands, and it was so incredibly painful and such a horrible thing to deal with. And of course my family eventually found out because I couldn't stop throwing up, which really gave the game away. And 10 years later, I just couldn't escape it. It was coming out in everything I was trying to write, and it was just, I couldn't get away from it, and I knew that I had to start writing about that.
So this would be an example of something that was chasing you, essentially?
Absolutely chasing me. I really couldn't escape it. The poets, you know, that were leading the workshops would be like, oh, write a poem about a bird, write a poem about da-da-da. And so this is a tiny thing, but this is an example. It's called Morning. I saw a small bird in my toilet bowl once, featherless and pink, with dark black smudges for eyes, and I was concrete for a long while after. So just tiny, I mean, there are more poems about that, and they are, to be honest, I've never even read that out loud. They are poems that I save for you as readers at home to digest, but it was absolutely inescapable, and it took 10 years to even be able to address it and think, can I write about this in a way that other people might feel something from or feel less alone when they read. So I think that is the power of poetry, definitely.
And I think with what you said in regards to keeping things back for people, I think that's really admirable, and it shows how serious the art form is to you that you do something like that, so I applaud that.
Thank you. It's really special. Thank you. And other things as well. I was talking to Robin in the break about how poetry and art and photography is so similar, and there's so much overlap. And I'd really encourage the creatives in the room, if you've got your genre, whatever that may be, if it's painting, if it's music, try a poem, try it out, because the overlap is there. But I was thinking a lot about, you know, you sometimes see artists on the side of like a riverbank and they're painting what they can see, and it's like a snapshot of the scene. I was thinking, what would it be like if, as a poet, you did a snapshot of a scene? So you don't put yourself in it at all. There's no I, it's just an image. So I wrote this tiny little something that is my screenshot, if you like, of a moment. And now, I wasn't there when this happened. This was a story that was retold to me. But I could not get over it, so this is my little snapshot of a moment that I'm going to read to you. If I can find it. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. It's called Local, and I hope none of you mind the word cunt. A middle-aged woman with paws tattooed on her tits goes to the garden centre. She hangs around the koi cart, watches them come to the surface, and mouth cunt at her. Look at them, they do that. Before the elderly couple are close enough to see, she pulls one out of the water, holds it in her hands until it stops thrashing, until the only thing moving is its desperate opening. Cunt, cunt, It's a little weird something. But that's a really fun exercise, you should try it. Just sketch an image, don't put yourself in it, see what happens.
Just touching on what you were saying about a little snapshot, I enjoy oil painting, and I've got this fantasy in my head where I get a little beret and I get a little scarf, and I just go out in Nottingham and I just like play French music.
Do it!
And I get in my pocket. Just paint. I mean, part of me wants to do it because I love painting and that would really encourage me, but another part of it is just to play that character. I think.
Do it!
Just the people's reactions will just be priceless.
It's your alter ego.
Yes.
I love that.
We need to stick with it.
Yeah, we do.
Emily in Paris.
Yes!
Alright, so just to continue with our interview, so what is it like to write a full collection? Like, what is that like?
Incredible, honestly.
And how many have you got?
Just the one. This is my debut. Oh my god.
Have you got a prototype of the works for the next one?
There's scraps of something. So most people, I think, approach it in a similar way. You kind of you write as things come, you write as things happen, and eventually you end up with this huge pile of poems that some are shit, some are first drafts, some you love, some you've been working on forever. And, you know, you pick your best, sometimes 10, let's say, and you start submitting them out. And that was a really long process for me. There was a press called Nine Archers, who I adore, and I made it down to the final 3, but then they cut me right at the last minute, and I was so heartbroken. And a similar thing happened with another London press. You get right down, so close, you're desperately trying not to hope, and then, of course, you get the letdown. But finally, I got accepted by Verve Press, who are great. They're based in Birmingham. They have a huge festival. And really they loved the sample, and they said, right, you know, I was working with an editor at the time called Caroline Bird, who is an incredible poet. If you haven't heard of her, please look her up. And she took all of my first drafts and everything I had, and she organised them into piles, and those piles were themes, and there were the yes pile, the maybe pile, the shit pile, and we worked through all of that together. And she really brought to my attention that I'd been writing a lot about home, even in poems that I thought had nothing to do with home. She was like, no, listen, you're writing about tiny people in your body making a home in you. You're writing about belonging. It's a huge thing. And so she pushed me to explore that. It was coming out kind of subconsciously, which made total sense because, you know, like I say, growing up, home was not great. And then I moved in with my grandparents, which was a reprieve, but it still wasn't, you know, what you'd hope for as a kid. So home really is this kind of elusive thing to me, and it started coming out. So I wrote more towards that theme and sent them in and got them, you know, got my critiques. And it was 2 years. So I got the offer during COVID. And I said, I don't know if I have enough for a full collection, what do I do? And he was like, I'll give you another year, keep writing. So it was really a process of drafting and redrafting and working out as well the journey of the book. I think a lot of people see poetry books and think it's just a slapdash of poems that don't speak to each other, but actually the challenge of a collection is piecing poems together that speak to each other in a way that you hadn't even realised. So suddenly 2 poems become explosive because you've put them together, and it was a real journey. You know, I had printouts all over my floor and was like, okay, chapter 1 is this, chapter 2 is this, and I got some amazing feedback because I thought that Hagstone, the book, was very much first chapter, all about the pain and heartbreak of being young and going through that kind of disconnected home life. And the second chapter was kind of me acting out, making my own mistakes, finding who I am. And the third chapter, in my mind, was those Disney villain poems, those poems that I thought were empowered, and me kind of, you know, looking back and calling stuff out. But actually, the order that I'd put them in, my editor had said, it's actually very sad. It's not powerful in the way you think it is. It's powerful in the way that, you know, the woman whose boyfriend's cheated on her scratches up his car. It's sad. There's a sadness in it. And it totally changed that whole last chapter in the book for me and made me realise it wasn't tying up in a nice, neat bow of, well, now everything's great. It was actually, here we are in the rubble of everything. This is the springboard to what comes next. And that was a huge kind of eye-opening moment for me, even in my personal life. You know, at the time I was in my late 20s and I thought, I'm past all of that, I'm through it, I'm becoming something else, but that was so wrong. It was so wrong, and the book showed me that. So
with all these interactions with all these different press houses. So what was your opinion on the culture and what it's like to be a spoken word artist today?
Yeah, it gets better every year, absolutely. We've just had poets like Joelle Taylor and Roger Robinson win the T.S. Eliot Prize. And the T.S. Eliot Prize is the UK's biggest prize for poetry. You get something like 25k and it changes your career. But typically it was for or won by more academic poets. I'm just quoting that because I don't believe it, but academic poets. And so when Joelle Taylor won the prize, the critics were up in arms. They were, T.S. Eliot will be rolling in his grave, can't have a spoken word poet, da da da. It was very, very divisive. There's a huge kind of cultural war between stage poets and performance poets and poets for the page. And the stage poets stereotypically thinks the page poet is boring and the page poet thinks the performance poet is just all about monologues and showing off. So it's a really hard space to navigate. And actually when I first came into the genre, it was all through the stage. Like I said before with Mouthy Poets, we gigged twice a year. And I felt like my responsibility was to entertain the audience and give them a good time. So I was writing quite jovial, light-hearted pieces. But it wasn't until I went to uni and I was studying those page poets and realising there's so much you can do on the page as well, that my love for that side of the industry was unlocked. But it's still to this day that, it's two very different worlds and it is hard to traverse them both. Absolutely. There's lots of gatekeeping.
So with my personal experience, I've been involved in many creative sectors and anything you can imagine, I've been there, done that. But I've very rarely met people like yourself who are spoken word poets. So it's just in my mind, I can't imagine a culture out there that is around spoken word and poetry. Maybe it's because I haven't assumed that myself, but I just find it strange that I don't know how everyone else feels about that, but you don't often come across that, just in everyday life or in any creative sectors that you work in. So would you say that the spoken word scene is increasing with each year, with the visibility?
Yes.
With the importance and people recognising what you're actually doing and understanding it?
Yeah, the spoken word scene has got a huge history. It started in New York in the speakeasy bars where people were getting up and spitting. There's a poetry channel, the name has escaped me now, but it'll come to me. And Kanye West gets up on the stage at the poetry gig and does his raps without the music, and it is the poetry of his writing. So there's a huge culture for it, as is with Page as well. And there were lots of kind of overseas wars between the English poets and the American poets, and the American poets, Allen Ginsberg, for example, was slagging off all the Liverpudlians, saying, "What have you got to write about?" It's so interesting when you get into that world. But there is a huge spoken word scene across the entire country. To be honest, the world. I've gigged in Granada in Spain, I've gigged in Krakow, I've gigged in Germany. There are so many groups, but there's still so much work to be done to show people that poetry isn't the boring thing that you study at GCSE.
Which I think is probably people's misconceptions.
Exactly.
So throughout all these different experiences in different countries, which country would you say that you've had to holds that high regard?
Oh my God, it's Krakow in Poland.
Okay.
Easy. They've got the most incredible, they have a festival called, I'm going to pronounce this so badly, Milosz Festival, after a famous Polish poet, and it's like Edinburgh Fringe. The whole city gets taken over. They've got independent bookshops on every corner. They take it incredibly seriously. Again, there's an award every year where all the banks, like BNP Paribas, all sorts of banks, donate loads of money to the prize winner. They hold it in high regard, and I think that, us as Nottingham as a city of literature, a UNESCO city of literature, we have a lot to learn actually from our European partners on how they uphold that standard of literature and what it does for a country and what it does for its people.
So how would that lead into your journey as being a poet laureate at Nottingham?
Yeah. That was a crazy gig. So Nottingham City of Literature put out almost like a job description, and they were calling for a poet to come and be the poet laureate of Nottingham, which essentially is like the poetic voice for the city. Yeah,
That's amazing.
huge. And you hear about, other famous poet laureates in time, and for me, I saw the job advert and I thought that is not me because I'm not an old rich white guy.
Well, that gives me visions of like someone united, like that's the
Yeah.
same energy. Like,
Well, absolutely.
So Nottingham is essentially said that you are the poetic voice of the city.
Exactly.
Which-
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, it's a huge honour, a huge responsibility, and it totally changed the trajectory of my career, really. So I sent in my application. You had to do a big cover letter and send samples of your poems and samples performing, and you got shortlisted until there was this like X Factor style gig, and it was the final 4 of us, and we were gigging in the Angel up the road, and it was so packed that people were literally sitting on the floor to come and see who was going to win. And again, I just gigged for my life. I was loud and proud and did everything I could to show that yes, I can do the page, but I can do the stage, have me, I want it. And I got it, which was just a huge honour, total shock. So then that was a 2-year residency, and that role was heavily about writing to commission. So I worked for organisations like the Royal Shakespeare Company, Nottingham Wildlife Trust, the BBC. I did private commissions. I had to write a poem about a Broadmarsh bus station closing. It was, it was crazy. The commission. I had to write a poem for a funeral service because I got auctioned off at an event, and the funeral service paid the most, so I had to write them a poem. I mean, it was crazy, but really fun. A lot of responsibility though, and you're also alongside that you're booked to teach a lot. So I was doing teaching residencies in inner city schools like Genogley or Clifton Academy, and that was a hard slog because of course the kids are learning about poetry in school and they don't teach them the exciting stuff. So you've got to go in there and break down those barriers before you can even get them to put pen to paper. But it was so important as part of that role to help people find their voice and tell their stories and use that craft to share their slice of life and where they've come from, and be a voice amongst the old white men,
So what happened after that 2-year residency? So they gave you that opportunity for 2 years, but then what happens afterwards?
Yeah, so after that, the role is over, and it's kind of over to you to capitalise on what you've done.
Just some amazing experiences, like teaching in schools, I'm sure that actually taught you a lot more than you thought it would.
Definitely, it was a huge, I don't know if any of you know about Genogley as an inner city school, but it's, it's got a bit of a tough reputation.
It's near Forest Fields. Yeah.
Exactly, it's facing Forest Fields, yeah. And, they would play classical music over the speakers at lunch to chill the kids out. Yeah, seriously, I was like, whoa. But it was so special because more often than not, it's the kids that aren't, getting the top grades and they're a bit disruptive in class and feel like they've got nothing to offer, and then, they're no one because they're not ticking those academic boxes, and you teach them about poetry and story, and suddenly they're like exploding off the page, and you think, yes, this is what this is for. This is to give those people the voices and to know that, all right, you've not got an A in maths, well, there's something else for you. There's something else. So after I finished my residency as laureate, I realised that I wanted to keep doing something that felt like I was giving back to that community. So I boldly emailed the directors of Nottingham Poetry Festival and said...
Was it bold though, considering what you mentioned?
Well, there was no calling for any extra work. There was no advertising, for job positions, but I just thought I'm going to email them anyway and just put myself out there and said, my laureateship's come to an end. I'm looking for a new role. Is there an opening at the festival? And they actually turned around to me and said, we need a new creative director. Would you like to do it? And I said, yes, I fucking would. So yeah, that was another 2 years residency role of directing Nottingham Poetry Festival, which was such a joy. It was a really hard job, and we can talk about that off the mic.
So this was essentially your inroad into the job sector of the literary world?
Definitely, yeah. It went from, I'd worked at that little publishing house and I'd got my degree, but that was obviously the laureateship as well, but that was the first literary institute that gave me a position. And so I managed to get some funding for us to get headline educators, because I feel within poetry it's quite difficult unless you're going to uni or you've got quite an academic group. It's not much space for learning and getting better and improving. So I set up the headline educator branch of the festival, where we would book poets that were, you know, big on the scene, prize winners, that would come in and run workshops for anybody and everybody who wanted to attend. So that was my little kind of like proud moment to give to them. So my first year was great, my second year was great, loads of planning, huge festival lined up, and then COVID hit, which was just awful. So immediately we were told, like, no, everything, pause everything needs to be cancelled, we don't know what's going to happen. And in the end, right near the end of the year, we did an online version of the festival. So none of us knew what we were doing, but we were just thinking on our feet, and it was a real challenge. But it worked really well. We had the poets were zoomed in live from their homes as I was on the stage in metronome, kind of comparing the Zoom. But we had the chat, and for whenever you were clicking your fingers in a poem or you were clapping, we got people to post hashtags. So the chat was like alight with loads of hashtags from people clapping and stuff. It was really great.
It must have been an experience.
It was, yeah.
It sounds stressful.
It was so stressful, honestly. We didn't know what to do. It was
how would you compare that experience to like gigging with bands in the past?
Yeah,
so what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, typically poets are, as you've seen tonight, it's you and your words and the way that you use your body and your voice. But I have been so fortunate in the last couple of years to start gigging with live bands, which has just unlocked something in me completely. A couple of years ago I was booked by a songwriter called David Wilson, who writes for The Stage and for plays all around London, and he was doing a showcase of work that didn't make the stage. And so he had like a 7-piece band, there was a cello and a piano, and they needed a poet to come and kind of write something that tied all those songs together and perform alongside the band.
So was this like freestyle?
Not for me, no. So I'd seen the songs, I'd read the lyrics, I'd heard the songs, but my challenge was to kind of write something that tied them all together and perform as almost like a bit of a femme fatale.
It sounds like a jazz.
It was in Peggy's Skyline.
Spoken word jazz, with music. I've never seen anything like it, but it sounds fascinating.
Honestly, it is magical. If you ever get a chance to go and see any poetry with a live band, you must go, because it is electric. It's so fun. And I recently just performed for Derby Poetry Festival, and they had a live band, but it was improv. So they've never seen your poems, they don't know how you perform, and they just said to us, basically, for whatever poems you want music for, give us a rough vibe and we'll riff in the background and play alongside you. And it makes you read differently because you're reading to the rhythm of the music. It's electric. It really
I can
is.
imagine that suits you, just judging from your style and how you read poetry, because you create your own music when you're creating those poems, when you're reading them.
Thank you, it was really special. There's a post on my Instagram of one of the poems if you want to go and look at it. It's Georgina Wilding Poet on Instagram.
So we also want to think, like, where do we go from here? What's in store for the future for Georgina Wilding?
I know, oh my God. So I definitely want to get some kind of Arts Council funding together to write a one-woman show alongside a jazz band, a musician, and really just unlock, because as you were talking about the poems thundering through you, that urge and desire is absolutely thundering through me right now. It's totally unlocked something.
And I can imagine that being amplified with live music.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have everyone's support in this room for your future. We want to see you succeed even more. We want you to reach the stars. You deserve that.
Thank you.
But what else have you got in
Well,
store for the future?
the goal is always the T.S. Eliot, so watch this space. If I win it, one day we are going out for a big drink. I need to write a couple more books first, I think, so I've got to get strict with that writing routine. Creatives in the room, if you've got any tips, please send them to me, because I got to get it. I've got to get that pen to paper.
Well, like we've spoken about privately, you have my full support, any help you want when it comes to marketing, social media.
Woo!
We all want to make you successful, we all want you to shine.
Thank you, that's so lovely.
But you need to put your finger out.
Oh yeah, we do. Come on, you guys hold me accountable in this room. Maybe you can commission me, just tell me to write something about something you like and I'll do it.
Right, so we want to take this opportunity. Does anybody in the audience have any questions for Georgina Wilding? Any at all?
I have one
Yeah. Hang on. What's your name?
That's Lucy.
We've got Lucy with a question.
So why is it called hagstone?
I'm so glad you asked that question. It's my favourite thing to explain. So, on that table, there are actual hagstones. So, a hagstone is a rock that has a naturally worn hole straight through the middle. And the key is it has to be natural. And there's loads of mythology around it in witchcraft and folklore, but essentially they say that if you, as a non-magical person, look through the eye of the hagstone, you can see the magic around you. So back in the day, if you had a village witch doctor, for example, and all of your cattle were dying and your kids were ill, you felt like you'd been cursed, the witch doctor would give you a hagstone and say, check your house. And the theory is there might be, you know, a disgruntled neighbour that's gifted you a bouquet of flowers, but actually they're cursed. And through the hagstone, you can see it and you can get that curse and chuck it out. So the book is, as you've seen tonight, full of lots of mythology and witchcraft and metaphor. So the book is kind of the hagstone for the reader. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. Does anybody else have any questions? Don't be shy.
When do you...
What's your name?
I'm Rose.
Have we got Ro with the question?
Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm a huge fan. As an outsider who loves poetry but finds it quite a tough thing to like get into.
Yeah.
So stupid, but I need to ask, when do I clap and when do I snap?
Right, so the snapping, if you've ever heard people click at a poetry gig, the snapping is because if a poet is mid-poem and they say a line or an image that you like, it's difficult to be like, woo, especially if it's sad or emotive or, you know, imagine, you're like, yes, I get you, girl, you know. So the click is, oh my God, that line.
Right.
And then the clapping comes at the end when the piece is done. But you can work in a poetry click for everything. So, yeah. Welcome.
Do we have any other questions? I mean, we do have another poet in the audience tonight. Why are you shaking your head? You're a poet. You write poetry.
Yes.
You're working on a piece right now. What's your name, darling?
I'm Kate.
We've got Kate with a question in the audience.
Hello. So I'm quite awkward and I'm not very good at being theatrical. So for my bit that I want to get better at, how do you use your body? How do you approach doing that and not looking like a twat doing it?
I hear you so much. First things first, you need to be comfortable because people will know when you're not comfortable. That doesn't mean you shouldn't push yourself out of your comfort zone because you absolutely should. There are some poets that will run back and forth the length of the stage and they're up and they're on their knees and they're There are other poets that just use their hands and they keep them very close to their body. Sarah Kay is a great example of an American poet. The opposite to her is somebody like John Sands, very theatrical. So my first tip would be get on YouTube, search things like button poetry, and look at how people are performing and see what you feel like you could do. Then the next trick is, especially if you're just starting out, is get a poem that you know you want to perform and annotate it with what feeling you're trying to put across or what mood. And if you need to, you can write a note, do a hand gesture here, do something there. And unfortunately, you've got to practice it in front of the mirror or on camera, which is awkward. But the more you do it, the better you feel. So yeah, look around, get on YouTube, see who you like.
Do we have any other questions in the audience? No? Okay. Right, so we'll be closing with a final poem from Georgie, and then there will be a wrap on the second Niche Arts by Jamboree.
Oh my God!
Keep it all on for Georgie!
Alright, I thought I would end on this piece because what I'm super proud of, it was a commission from the Royal Shakespeare Society. And oh God, I'm standing for the final one. Right, these shoes are going to slip off me, let's see. Oh no, we're okay.
I love that you're worried about the shoes slipping.
Yes, so this was a commission to the Royal Shakespeare Society, and they put the brief to me that they wanted us to write something about generational gaps and what we can learn from them. So I thought about the other generations in my family that have taught me things as a woman. So I wrote this poem. It's called An Auntie at a Birthday Party. And actually, something in this did happen at Rev's at the Corner House. So if you want to reenact it tonight, come and speak to me after. That night, I counted the seconds between each flash of disposable camera to see how close the storm was. Around tables, girls discussed the boys fist pumping on the dance floor, decided it was him on the left most suitable for the look. They shared the same matte chili gloss, popped their lips, blotted the excess with napkins and admired the petals of the prints left over. One picked up a cardboard tie, held it to her collarbone and invited the boy into her selfie. Seconds past the flash, another boy appeared and slapped the camera from their faces. Amidst the rutting of bodies, spilt drinks and squealing trainers on the vinyl came a woman. She wrapped her hand around his tall throat. In that grip, I saw all the doors she locked and the way she left the key in, half turned so it couldn't be undone from the outside. I saw the radio she'd leave playing at night, its voices standing guard in the hall. I saw her little girl, how she taught her to recognise the 9 on the keypad of the phone. By the time her hand reopened, he was standing upright in the middle of it, smaller than all of us, walking the lines of her palm. Every girl in that bar, camera flashes casting light shadows on their faces, looked from the woman's hand to their own and back again. Thank you.
Give it up for Georgina Wilding, everybody!
Give us a round, everybody.
I'm incredibly proud to have become a friend to you, and I'm just amazed at the journey that you're on, and I can't wait to see where it goes. So I'm just going to give you help.
Yeah, come on.
Just one last thing, so please support Georgie's artwork. We do have some material here for sale. Georgie will be around for a chat afterwards. Please take the chance to mingle, have a good time. We're all here as creatives on this journey, and let's be there for each other, let's support each other. And just one final announcement, we do have some flyers for the next Niche Artefact Artist Showcase. A cult artist will be on the 15th of November. I've got some flyers here as a thank you.